Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Clownz with Four Guys with Quarters. You also know me as Carlo. I have a very special guest today. It's Scott Millard from Feardemic Games. Scott, go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do.
Hey, Carlo. Thanks very much for inviting me. And it's really great to be here on this fantastic Friday night. Because there's nothing better to talk about on a Friday night than the games business or the business of games. But essentially, I run a independent games company or games publisher called Feardemic, and we are part of the Bloober Team group of companies. And so, on the Feardemic side of things, we publish independent games. We have games such as One Shell Straight to Hell, which is coming up next year, Cathedral 3D, which came out a couple of weeks ago. We have Darq Complete Edition, which is coming up later this year. On Bloober Team side of things, you'd know them from Layers of Fear or Blair Witch. But the one thing in common that we have with Bloober Team, besides we all live in the same office and kind of share the same desk space, is that our focus, our number one focus, is horror games. Horror games are our specialty. That's our vertical, and we are going to sort of continue to do that. Now, Bloober Team's interpretation of horror games is a little different to Feardemic. At Feardemic, we tend to sort of have a wider interpretation of a horror game, whereas Bloober Team's much more of a psychological horror brand.
Okay. Well, it sounds pretty interesting because it's almost like a what do you call it? Like a niche group of um, games that you guys develop or publish. But it seems that it's getting increasingly popular in that space. I know a lot of people that are already talking about, the medium. I know a lot of people that have talked about Dark and they can't wait to play the on the Series X or the PS5. So a
Mhm.
lot of people are really excited for some of the stuff coming out of your company of studios. And I know on Feardemic side, you are a publisher. So,
Mhm.
what is it like to be a publisher in such a growing industry as the video game industry?
Well, it's kind of it's old school at the same time as it being new school. I mean, we went through a period where a lot of developers were, convinced that going it alone was the way to go. And I think, and now we're seeing, a lot of developers realizing that, hey, we're really good at developing games. We're really good at, our specialist function. Maybe we should work with somebody who is good at selling games or good at operating the publishing side of things or the marketing and sales side, and that's really what publishers do. And I mean, Feardemic is really geared to marketing and sales. The team that we have working on these projects are there working every day, getting the programmatic marketing right, working with PR agencies and our own PR lists to make sure that as many people see these games as possible. And that's the value that a publisher brings. It doesn't, people kind of mistakenly think that the publisher finances the game, which they can, and sometimes they do, but the real value that a publisher brings to the table is marketing, sales, and distribution. And that's kind of the old school way. And if you have a look at big companies like EA and Bethesda and Namco Bandai, they really do separate their company down those lines: development, studios, and sales and marketing. And and both of them are coexist and sort of coexist together to provide one functional, one internal service to the other.
Do you find that being a publisher is challenging right now, or do you find that it's no different than being a publisher as say like 20 years ago?
Well, look, the games market has changed a lot. I've been in the games industry. Oh, I won't tell you the year, but it was a company called Sega I started in, and
Oh, wow.
so I've been 16-bit gaming was a big thing back then. But things have changed a lot, and oddly enough, my path to the games industry came via the music business. I worked in Warner Music and I had my own independent record label. And the reason I ended up in gaming was because I was plucked out of there because we shared the same customer. And I had a good relationship with that customer, a big chain of stores in Australia at the time. But it's interesting that the games industry has sort of kind of followed the same trajectory as the music business. And I say that because at the beginning of the games business, say, 20, 25 years ago, when, the barrier to entry to make a game was actually really high. The software you needed, the development kits, the amount of the amount of resources that you needed to build a game for a Mega Drive or a Nintendo or a PlayStation or a Saturn or whatever at that particular point in time was actually quite significant. And then things changed as the game engines like Unreal and Unity came along, and suddenly there was this spirit of independence that sort of brought all these people out of their bedrooms who realized, hey, we can actually make games without investing a whole lot other than our time and our skill and our expertise and our love and our drive to make something. And that's where the things have really, really changed. There's so many games out there, but that's okay. I mean, there should be so many games out there. It's the same as, music, film, any entertainment medium at the moment. I mean, everyone has a right to express themselves in whichever way that they choose. And if they choose games as an art, they have every right to make games. And, if anything, I think, people have got a spoil for choice. But I think out of that, choice that they have at the moment, there's over the next few years, I think a lot of developers now are sort of kind of really focused on quality, because that's the only difference at the end of the day, is to be better at something than everybody else. And yes, sometimes that takes money, of course, but like it did in the old days. But a lot of the times it just takes perseverance and talent. I mean, Darq is a fantastic example. Unfold Games is a one-man studio in LA, and Vlad, he has basically learnt the whole skill of programming from scratch. I mean, he's a musician, so he it wasn't sort of like oh well, I was already programming computers and I just thought I'd make a game. He really had a desire, a burning desire to create this character, create this world, and he was able to do it because the tools were there for him, and they were sort of economically available to him. Unity's free. You can download it. You can teach yourself over time. You have a genesis of an idea, and you can build on that idea. 3 years, 4 years later, he had Darq finished, and it's a real testament to a single person's sort of commitment to building a game or building something that is sort of new and original. And it's done extremely well for him.
Yeah, I was taking a look at some of the images of Dark I found across the internet, and it seems like it's won massive awards. I couldn't believe how
Mhm.
many awards. I looked at the image because I was trying to make a thumbnail, but there was so many awards on the left side, so many awards on the right side. So it must be a truly fantastic game, and I really can't wait to play it when I get a Series X. I'm really excited for it. Actually, it really piques my interest because from what I read, the story is about somebody who is basically in a dream that turns into a nightmare.
Yeah, I'm not going to give you any spoilers, but you can buy the game on PC now, so you can sort of work it out. But yeah, it is a really interesting story, and it kind of it's a lot more complicated than it seems on the surface. It's a very, very complex world. And there was an announcement this week in regards to the comic book series and the expansion of the world as well. So there's all these really cool things happening around Unfold and Lloyd the character. So the console versions of the game, which are coming later this year and early next year on the next generation, because next generation. are just sort of kind of part of the whole rollout. But yeah, Darq has won a spectacular amount of awards, and it deserves every one of them. And and some of the awards that has been nominated in have just been crazy. I mean, I think I saw one for sound design where it was up against Cyberpunk and Call of Duty.
Wow.
Which was really just bizarre because it is a one-man studio, a one-man project, and it was up against these projects that would have had probably 13, 14 people working on the sound design, whereas there was just Vlad and Bjorn working on the sound design of Darq. So it is a sort of a special game, and it really is testament to the fact that you can build a game on your own that is going to not only sell well, but is going to be a critical success as well.
I believe that. Just from what I've seen so far in the game, I think it's gonna hit that right spot for a lot of people that love that type of genre, and I think it's gonna trickle over to like the casual market as well because of the art style. And I haven't heard the music, but even possibly the music, it sounds fantastic for sure. How did you get involved with Unfold? Did they come to you, or did Feardemic find them?
We actually found them. I mean, that they have an interesting backstory, and if anyone Googles them, you would find that Vlad was approached by many different publishers, and those publishers sort of came to him prior to the game being released, and had offered an assortment of deals and an assortment of different types of approaches, and none of which kind of resonated with him. There was also the most infamous of all, which was Epic, who insisted that it had to be exclusive to Epic, and there was a big blow up on Reddit, and literally created a big stir online about this game, and that was the first time it sort of kind of ended up on my radar. But literally, it just came down to talking with Vlad, and we kind of found some common ground in the way that we thought about things and the way that we wanted to build Feardemic, and we weren't really we didn't want to take away his intellectual property. That was his. We wanted to provide marketing, sales, and in this case, porting services, because obviously we had some experience porting games to consoles. I mean, Medium's a Series X exclusive, and we're doing Observer now for PS5 internally. So we had some experience porting games, and so it kind of made sense for him to allow us to get involved with that and manage that process. And so far, so good. So everyone seems to be happy. But again, our predominant role here is in a sales and marketing role, we give him extra hands because before it was only him, and I still can't believe that he did most of that on his own. I mean, not to mention the fact that he wrote a book about the whole experience and released a book about the whole experience a couple of months ago as well.
Oh wow.
So he's, for one guy, he's extremely busy. Sorry, my lamp just exploded. But anyway,
That's okay.
for one guy, he's extremely busy and extremely productive.
Yeah, it definitely looks that way. It looks like a very talented. Like I thought it was a studio that developed that game. I couldn't even tell that it was, one or two people. Like I really thought a full studio did that game. And now that you told me that, I'm highly impressed by what came out of that. So as a publisher in this situation, your job is to market the game and get the game known and out there. And is that the typical role of a publisher in general for all the other titles as well, or is there different roles that a publisher can play?
It's probably the typical role, but of course, inevitably we get involved in everything from financing to to organizing QA, technical costs, and localization. I won't bore everyone with all those types of roles, but again, because we're doing this all the time, and I mean, that was one of the reasons for Feardemic in the first place. I think there were a lot of skills that were accumulated at Bloober Team. And when I came in as well, I had my own skills, and I brought some more people in with a whole lot of skills. So there's all these skills or things that we have learned over time. And we're going to get better at those things if we're doing them more regularly. So whereas Bloober Team focus on big titles, and they're going to do one every year, one every 2 years, Feardemic can focus on smaller titles and have a much more populated release schedule. And so we can be, next year we're hoping to, put together a release schedule that has about maybe 5 to 10 different games on it, and all the multiple SKUs associated with that. And the next year after, the next year after, the next year after that. So, and the more we are doing the things that we are doing, be it QA, localization, porting, PR, marketing, building mailing lists, the better we're going to get at it, and the more of that skill we're going to be able to transfer over to other people's games. So yeah. I mean, this is not an industry where one size fits all. It really is an industry where every project is different, and every project requires a different approach. So yeah. I mean, there's no real rules, but generally, there's two tracks, which is the development side and the marketing and the publishing side. But one of the things that often we see when we're looking for games is that people are overly ambitious when it comes to their first or first gaming project, and and you seem surprised that Darq was made by one person, but also Cathedral 3D that we released a couple of weeks ago was again made by one person, and it was kind of like a whole 6-year project that Mateusz had had done. He built the engine, he built everything himself, and personally I really like those types of projects because they are a good way to learn what the next project is going to be. If you look at the sort of the various different studios and developers that are out there, when you're looking for them, the last thing you want to do is find a whole team that have never made a game before. This is their first game, and they want to make a AAA game, and it's like, oh no, that's not going to happen that way. You've got to sort of work together on a project or on several projects before you start scaling up. And I think a lot of the smaller developers that sort of do single person projects are heading in the right direction, because if they can make that work, and then the next project is like a 10 person team, then the next project is 20 people, next project is 30 people, eventually they can sort of get to the stage where they're doing much bigger productions and much sort of bigger developments. But I often see a lot of developers sort of like pitching their games, and they're looking for investment from publishers, they're looking for all this technical support. The marketing's kind of not important, they just need that money and they need the technical support to cover the wages of 10 people on the first game. And it's like, well, no, that's sort of the kind of red flags for us. We will not go there. But that's my opinion. I mean, I'm sure there's been instances where publishers have found small teams that have 10, 15 people and funded that to a success for their first game. But generally speaking, it's unusual for people to have success with their first game. Bloober Team is another great example. I mean, they cut their teeth on work for hire long before they made Layers of Fear. So by the time they got to Layers of Fear, they'd been working together for some time, and they had honed their skills working for other people.
Now, when developers come to you, do you guys look for like finished projects already, or something close to the end, or can they be anywhere in the project, and it still might be interesting to Feardemic?
Yeah, look, it could be anywhere in the project. I mean, we have just even the titles we have now that you can see on our website. Some of them we've started literally from scratch. Like One Shell Straight to Hell was one we started from absolute scratch. There was nothing there before. And whereas Cathedral 3D came to us almost finished, Darq came to us completely finished. It had already been out for 6 months on PC. And so again, every game is different. But and so it kind of, yeah, every situation and every relationship with a developer is different. If we've got a relationship with a developer and we know the developer, or the developer has experience, and they've got an idea for a project from scratch, I mean, then sure, we will absolutely work with them, and we'll consider working with them from the absolute beginning. But if the team's had no experience and they've got like a pitch deck and maybe even a small demo, it's really hard to understand whether or not that game is actually going to make it to the end. So much can happen in the 2 years that it can take to make that game.
Okay. Is there ever a time where that Feardemic tries to reach out? I know that you mentioned in Dark you saw it blow up on Reddit, but with the other games, let's say for example that you
Mhm.
have that you're about to be publishing or have published, did a lot of those come to you, or did you guys go out to them as well?
Actually, no. I mean, this is a strange thing. Um, very rarely do we get an email from a stranger saying, hi, we've developed this game, we want to publish it. It just very rarely happens. I think in the last few months it's only happened once. I mean, we are reaching out all the time, and you would be surprised how few people actually respond to us. And it's just kind of part and parcel. I think this year's been really weird because it usually has been game shows. It's usually Gamescom. It's usually Nordic Games, or it's usually Games Connection, where you can see a whole bunch of different developers, and developers can sort of find you and reach out. So that's kind of usually has been the process. But generally speaking, we're the ones doing the reaching out, and we sort of kind of make the first move, if you like. But that doesn't mean that we don't want people to contact us. We absolutely do. It makes our life a lot easier. So yeah. I mean, you can find on our website there is an email address, bureau@feardemicgames.com, and we be glad to see pitch decks and various different proposals there.
One thing I wanted to ask you, and it slipped my mind. I'm trying to think of it again. For some reason, it just slipped my mind. But oh, that's what it was. The QA that has to go through for these for different games. I know that you mentioned that
Mhm.
sometimes the publisher is the one that finds the QA studios or the QA talent to go through everything. How long does that process take, and what is that like? Because I know that there's a lot of gamers that are particularly interested in what the QA process is like, from a development standpoint and from a publisher standpoint. Because a lot of people that are not in the industry don't really understand what true QA does.
Yeah, I think the bigger studios, and even Bloober Team, they run their own QA operation, and it's much. I mean, the games are big, complicated beasts that require people that go through them time and time again to make sure that things are as they are. And a lot of times the QA process is run in parallel with game development, so that it's constantly being updated. But with indie games and indie developers, what we find is that there's usually, either a single person, or at most maybe 3 or 4 different people working on a game, and they don't have the resources for QA. They're doing their own QA sort of as they're going through. And often, if they've been working on this game for several years, it's very hard for them to see past what they imagine the games is. So it's really good to get some fresh eyes on that game, and you can do it in either 1 month sprints or like a week sprint. And there's different types of the main type of QA that that most indie game developers will go through is just like functional QA, and it's just people just playing through the game over and over again, just trying to find things that aren't working, whether it's sort of graphics that don't do what it's supposed to do, the protagonist getting trapped, or the AI and the enemies not working as it should be, or misspellings in the UI. I mean, those types of things that get past developers as they're sort of are developing away day after day. So and we have some partner studios that we work with that supply us QA services, and they do it all the time. So we just sort of basically send the code over, and then they will do it for however many hours you allocate to them. The other one, CQA, or certification QA, which is sort of kind of a little bit more specialized. It's usually like a 1 week, 40-hour sprint for an indie game that is done specifically for the PlayStation or the Xbox, to make sure that all the TLCs and everything are all are correct, the right terminology is used, the right logos are in the right place, and it's not going to get sort of failed because of something tiny.
Okay.
but
And
but, but, yeah. Anyway, sorry. But we provide that, for indie studios. I mean, as I said, if the studio is a bigger studio, they'll likely have their own and run their own QA. But just for us, we're able to supply it just as a service.
okay. And is there ever a time where, especially smaller developers, like, one or two man studios, they develop a game and then they come to you as the publisher, and they'll say, we can't find anybody for music, or we can't find anybody for voiceovers. Does a publisher ever help them out with aspects of that?
Absolutely. I'm actually in a couple of games.
Oh, are you?
My voice, because simply, yeah. Well, those characters where they only have like one line. It's sort of like, well, where are we going to get this voice from? Sort of like, well, Scott speaks English. Like, let's ask him. So yeah, absolutely. When sort of smaller teams, it really can be a co-op effort, and it kind of is can be a lot of fun to sort of get involved. I mean, to a certain extent, and sort of pitch in. But yeah, I mean, generally, again, I mean, that's why. It's often good to have a publishing partner, because in all the different various aspects of making a game, most of the people in the publishing have some experience. I often say to people, when they ask me, what do you do? How do you call yourself? Well, I'm a generalist. I know a little about everything, and I'm no expert in anything, but literally almost every process of the game development cycle, the game sales cycle, uh, uh, selling it, where all the game shops are in Seoul, in Tokyo, in Dubai. I know where they are. I know who to call. So no matter what you question, I can probably rustle up some sort of answer. Or if I can't, I know who to ask. And again, that's sort of the benefit of having a publisher. And when people sort of often ask me, well, what is a publisher anyway? I said, well, think about it, a developer as a bunch of experts, or working together on a common goal. Well, a publisher is kind of a bunch of generalists that know a little bit about everything, that are there to basically provide services to that developer, and help you sell more.
That's a good point that you brought up. I'm sorry, my mic was cut out there for a second. But the point that you brought up was the fact that, game stores like in Seoul or Dubai that you mentioned. As an American, I typically think of, like, Walmart, GameStop, or Best Buy. But a lot of us here in North America, we don't even think about the fact that other countries have smaller game stores, or might have different types of distribution. Like, my friend who lives in Belgium, he has to go through Media Market for almost everything. So
Yep.
the role of a publisher, is that also your job, is to make sure that everything is aligned in the stores and the countries where the games are allowed in?
Yeah, I mean, there was a time where most of my career was spent selling DVDs. I mean, because games came on a DVD or a DVD format, whether it be an Xbox game or PlayStation game or even a PC game, and so physical distribution was a big part of it. Up until this year, I mean, last year you still saw that about probably 25 to 30% of PlayStation games were sold in a physical box. This year, all bets are off. But it still is kind of an important part. There is still a sort of a market out there that wants to sort of feel a PlayStation game in their hand. And there are certainly parts of the world that can't get things digitally, so they will get them physically. But so there is still, though there was up until COVID arrived and sort of changed everything, a big sort of market for physical games, not PC but mainly on the consoles. And I don't think that'll ever go away. I think there's always, and I mean I can see from this just behind you, you love to collect things, and gamers love to collect things. I mean, I think any fans of entertainment like to collect a physical manifestation of whatever it is that they like, and it's always going to be there to some degree. Perhaps not as it was prior to in 2019 or prior to that, but certainly to the extent where we see people collecting vinyl today and CDs of their favorite bands. There's no reason why people won't still want to buy physical copies of their favorite game franchises. I know that there is a sort of limited run games in the US. I mean, they've grown spectacularly because simply, I mean, it's sort of kind of shifted from that, pallet distribution through retail stores like MediaMarkt to a more specialized sort of channel where collectors and people that want to sort of build their physical game libraries, focus on, they know where they can go. They can go to these direct subscription services and have those games delivered. So again, that whole process of knowing how to put a game in a box and how to get it on a shelf is kind of bread and butter for the publishing side of things. But it's shifting, it's changing a lot more. We talked about earlier about how the gaming industry is kind of following the music industry on that path of like the barrier to entry is lower. It's easier to make music, it's easier to make games. All the software is free. It's also getting easier to distribute them as well because most of it's all moving to digital. We haven't quite got to the subscription model yet, but it's coming. It's inevitable, and people are sort of cobbling together these sort of pseudo subscription plans like Game Pass or PlayStation Plus, and these will evolve into these subscription services, and that will change everything again. It's an interesting ride.
Yeah, it's a good point that you brought that up because I do think that a lot of console manufacturers, a lot of like PlayStation and Xbox, I think they really are gearing towards their subscription services like the PS Now and the Game Pass, and I think that does definitely present a challenge because not only is that digital, but it's like a digital subscription, and I think that it thinks sometimes it might be really hard for, let's say, an independent studio to really navigate the whole physical versus digital versus subscription based services. And as a publisher, do you guys get involved in a lot of that as well?
Well, it's a constant topic of conversation, because we know that it's coming. How, the Bloober Team side of the business, I mean, they've participated in Game Pass, and Microsoft have been fabulous partners to have. And Game Pass is a great service for. I mean, it makes a lot of sense, but obviously for independent game developers, it sometimes feels like it's an enormous hurdle to navigate, because I mean, essentially you've got PlayStation, Microsoft, Google, they're all sort of moving in that direction, but they have, limited amounts of people to, that are getting bombarded with offers, every day. So sometimes it feels quite quite an insurmountable wall to get past. But look, it's coming, and how we deal with it in a as far as an industry goes, whether it sort of mimics Spotify on a sort of a pay per use, or whether it mimics Netflix. Don't know yet, but it is going to be a difficult one. But I will say this, though. I mean, when subscription services like Netflix first arrived, a lot of people in the film business said that, this is just unsustainable. We are not going to be able to create content like we did before if we can't sell it to different markets and pre-sell it to different markets as we did. And but strangely, Netflix came along, HBO Go came along, and the quality of entertainment we get now, as compared to 20 years ago, is much better. So things can change. So even if the market changes radically and subscription services become the norm for the games industry, everyone will adapt, and there will still be great games, and there will still be a lot of games to choose from. So it just means that we're just going to have to work out how to navigate it, how to make money out of it if we're not actually selling units and getting unit sales or unit revenue per unit revenue. It's just a different way of doing things.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, fair enough. It does definitely seem like a challenging landscape up ahead for something like this in the industry. Is there Well, I'm sorry, I lost my question again. But
That's right.
when it comes to, I know that you said that you're part of the Bloober Team family, like it's a family of companies. How many
Yes.
companies are within the Bloober Team family?
Well, there's essentially Bloober Team, which is a public company, and Feardemic, which is a 100 an owned subsidiary of that company. The Bloober Team's at the public company, so that's kind of it. Actually, there's not there's a Poland. You may not know this, but Poland is like a sort of a spider's web of game developers. So this is, again, I'm an Australian and I live in Poland. And the reason I'm in Poland, like a lot of other foreigners in Poland, is because of the games industry. So oddly enough, I was listening to the minister who's in charge of the digital economy in Poland, and on BBC, and she said something that nearly just made me fall off my chair, which was that CD Projekt was about 2% of Poland's export GDP.
Oh,
That is
wow.
insane. To have that one company to be responsible for that much of export revenue for Poland. And that alone, and CDP were one of the first companies that in Poland that sort of grew and showed the government that, hey, wow, you can make a lot of money out of upskilling your workforce into like a content game development IT powerhouse. And that's essentially what they've done over the past over the past decade or so. The Polish government with the EU has invested significantly in building support services for game studios in Poland. And as a result, I think Poland now is in the top 10 game producers in the world. There is so many game developers here. There's so many game developers that are actually public companies that are listed on the Warsaw Stock Exchange. It's a very, very healthy business. And, Bloober Team is just one of them, one of many. But being a small country, a relatively small country, everybody knows everybody else. So it's kind of like this big network of companies. And when it comes to porting, when it comes to localization services, QA, sharing resources. There is an absolute network of people that everybody knows that you can always find a solution to any problem that you encounter. And what was really kind of interesting is not just the government support, but strangely, I mean, I think, I mean, my experience with Polish people has been that they're an extremely creative bunch, and if they weren't making games, they'd be sort of making music and making comics and books and all sorts of other creative pursuits as well. But I mean, literally, if you go to any of the bookstores here, the amount of output that Polish people are capable of, it's quite surprising. And the quality is fantastic. So Cyberpunk will probably blow everyone's socks off, because just the amount of effort that they put into it, and the enormous will that they have. And oddly enough, another piece of connection here is that Vlad, the developer of Darq, he grew up here in Poland. So that
Wow.
was another connection there, that sort of Polish games mafia connection, that sort of like he was kind of really interested in the fact that he'd grown up here, and we were here, and it was kind of like a strange sort of circular sort of thing that he left when he was a teenager, and he was able to work with us, and even though he's been here many times since, it's sort of interesting for him to work with a Polish company on the release of Darq.
Yeah, I was one of the guys on my podcast on the panel. He actually used to be involved in the games industry a long time ago. He used to do a lot of licensings for, like, I think Mad Cats, some, I think, the
Mhm.
controllers. And he was saying that when he went to Poland, earlier on, when CD Projekt Red was a little bit younger, there was still like massive billboard signs, because CD Projekt Red was praised as a company for all the talent that they developed and pushed out to the rest of the world. And I think that you're right when you say that Poland has a lot of creative people. We see that amazing studios come out of Poland, the creative stories come out of Poland, and the Bloober Team is in Poland, and a lot of people are really looking forward to the medium. I know that it's like the number one game on almost everybody's list for Xbox Series X when that thing comes out.
Yeah, I mean, even I'm excited about it. I haven't played it. I mean, so not. I mean, we like most companies, or certainly, yeah, in Europe anyway. For the past, or since March, we've kind of been working from home. So I haven't, been, had the fortune to be able to sort of see the latest iterations of Medium. There've been sort of a lot of those guys are all working from home as well. It's been, very difficult on many fronts to sort of, continue on with all these people scattered everywhere. But they've certainly overcome it, and now they've got a release date, and I'm looking forward to playing it as well. So yeah. Sorry, I can't speak to you on Medium, but I can
That's
certainly
okay.
help find you someone who can, though. But
Absolutely. Speaking of that, I mean, COVID has been a real challenge, I think, for everybody in the world. Particularly, I think the game industry, it's really hard for them because I picture rooms of developers working together, with their project managers, and I think everybody being at home, it's a little bit more difficult because you can't go to somebody's desk and say, "Hey, I need help with this," or go to one of the graphic artists and say, "Hey, I got an idea for this." Whereas, everybody's just at home and they're having to go back and forth. Do you find that it has made game development a little bit more challenging?
I mean, look, to be honest, we are really lucky. I think everyone in our industry is kind of very lucky to be able to, you know, work, go home and be able to work and continue doing the things that we do. You just can't compare that to what's happening in the rest of the world. I mean, you can say, oh, yeah, well, I can't go to down, down to the other room, or down to the admin room, or, I can't borrow this from this guy, or can't find out directly from this other desk. But compared to what the rest of the world is going through, it's absolutely nothing. And I just thank my lucky stars every day that I'm able to sort of start work in the morning and finish every evening, because a lot of people can't do that. So you'd be foolhardy to say that it hasn't had an effect. Yes, it's absolutely had an effect. And I think over the next 12 months or so, it'll probably really bite us when it comes to sort of sales. I think there could be a lot of economic pain to come, but generally, I think the games industry is very, very fortunate, and all of us should be very, very thankful that we can continue doing what we do, and hopefully try and support those who can't.
Particularly with Dark, I know that it's coming out on physical release as well, and that would be a good example of maybe some of the challenges that the world is facing. Getting the discs produced, was that a challenge with COVID going on?
No, not at all. I mean, again, all pretty much all the supply lines are all in place. I mean, again, I mean, all the PlayStation 5 and Series X's are, getting delivered. They're getting made. They're all being made in China. The plants are still up and operational. It's kind of, yeah, I mean, all the supply chains are there. I mean, of course, the supply chains are challenged, like everybody else, but generally the games industry is sort of holding together quite well, and I don't think really we've got much to complain about, given the state of the world.
I know that you've had a lot of experience in the games industry, as you mentioned before. From when you started in the game industry, did you ever think that it would grow to become this massive industry that surpassed Hollywood?
um well, it kind of started out of the toy business. I mean, again, so Sega was, literally being distributed in Australia by a toy company, and I think by a toy distributor, and it was like that pretty much around the world. It was considered just a toy. It took a while, but once it started to evolve, yeah, I mean, look, it's really the benefit of hindsight. Can say, well, yes, it was always going to be big, but I think there's a yeah, I mean, I think it was always going to be big. It was always going to merge into something. But it's been big for a long, long time. I mean, it's been a mainstay of the entertainment business for God, at least the last 10, 15, 20 years. I think in the late 80s and early 90s, yes, it was kind of bit like the Wild West, but but once Sony sort of arrived and started to sort of and certainly when Microsoft arrived, it all got very serious and all got very very, very large and corporate. So it's interesting to sort of I mean, I started with Sega. Um, then the company got bought by Infogrames and changed its name to Atari, and then bought by Namco Bandai. So after 12 or 13 years or so, I was the managing director of Namco Bandai in Asia, and all I'd ever dealt with was AAA games. I'd never, sold an indie game in my life, and in fact, honestly, I just didn't even know they existed at that particular point, and they didn't. Um, you know, Really, it was all big console games, and everyone had their portfolio, and that was it. Indie games have been something that's sort of happened over the last sort of 10 or so years, but it's kind of really refreshing and really creative to work in the sort of business of indie games, and it sort of kind of reminds you of the everything. You can do it yourself rather than sort of be part of some big machine.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Because yeah, I think when I watched the history in indie games, I think Super Meat Boy was one of the first indie games to get the recognition of surpassing, I think, like 1 million sales or $1 million. It was some
Mm.
big feat. And then after that, we started seeing an explosion of indie games. And then for a while, it was almost like the market was mass saturated with everything. I mean, we've seen some really strange indie games out there that cost like 90 cents or 69 cents to quality indie games and double A studios. So it's been a real transformation between the launch of Super Meat Boy until now and how indie games have really come about. I mean, looking at Dark, I can definitely say that does not look like an indie game. That looks like at least a double A budget or a triple A budget from when I look at it. I haven't checked out the other games yet. Looking forward to it. You mentioned there was the one that you're producing, publishing next year was one
One
shots.
shot straight to hell.
Yep.
So yes, that's coming next year. So we're working on a whole lot more deals and a whole lot more games that we're sort of looking at the moment. So expect to see a lot more from Feardemic. I mean, our ambition is to sort of build a portfolio over the next few years that which will allow us to sort of kind of continue snowballing and managing the intellectual property and expanding into other things like film and toys and spin-offs and comics, and help all the help all our developers and partners to sort of expand their sort of area of income. But it will always be within the vertical of horror.
Yeah, and that's something that's amazing because it seems like that it's a growing area of video games, and it's great to see that you publish that to help them get out there. Because I think without a publishing company, it's really hard to distinguish between the horror and niche games and a quality horror game. And I think that from what you guys are publishing, from what I've seen from the site so far, everything seems to be good quality. It's something that you guys look for when you publish something. And the next question I have for you was being part of the Bloober team of companies. Do they give you a lot of freedom on what you can do, or do they have to oversee what gets published by Feardemic?
No, more they provide more freedom than you can imagine. So that they kind of let us do whatever we like, and within reason. But it's certainly not a dictatorship, and we're sort of kind of free to experiment with various types of horror. I mean, one of the things that I really want to try and do, and I haven't found it yet, but I'm looking for a horror game that appeals to kids. Because one of the great things about horror is that it's there's a full spectrum of of examples or styles of horror. There's horror that's hardcore, whether it be some classic sort of vampire or zombie sort of game that's sort of bloody and potentially likely to get banned in Australia. Or down the other end, you've got horror that is sort of kind of appeals to kids, like Monster High and those types of sort of stories that are sort of based around monsters. And all of it is horror, and all of it sort of fits within that vertical. The only difference is the age group that you're targeting. So this is the interesting thing about Feardemic, is that we're sort of kind of have the latitude to experiment with these types of markets. And with Bloober Team, I doubt you'll be seeing them making a kids game anytime soon. But with Feardemic, you never know. You never know.
I want to go back to the comic book that you mentioned that's coming out for Dark. Um,
Hmm?
who is publishing that comic, and is it going to be like a digital only, or is it going to be local comic book retailers?
Oh, you'll have to sort of if you go to feardemicgames.com and you sign up for our newsletter, you will know exactly. Yes, only this week the comic was announced, and it was just teased. The front cover was released. You can find that in the news section of our website. And as far as the availability dates, as far as the distribution methods, and all that information will be forthcoming. But personally, I'd love to see it in all formats, whether it be digital, whether it be print. But with physical and print, The challenge is always going to be the condition of the market next year. And I know, I mean, there's a lot of people out there that really want to buy Darq on Darq Complete Edition in physical, and you know we're hopefully going to have that out and available early next year. But you know, the condition of retail at the moment, it's we don't know whether there's going to be any shops to distribute it to. But hopefully by early next year there will be some light at the end of the tunnel, and you know, things will be getting back to normal.
I hope so. I'm really looking forward to it. Do you have a definitive date yet for Dark, or is it just sometime next year?
The SKUs for next year, we don't have definitive dates as yet. The PS4 and Xbox One version, and one of the most important things that we announced this week, if you buy the PS4 or the Xbox One version, you can upgrade it to the Series X or the PS5 version free of charge.
Oh
So, and that's
wow!
all for all of 2021. And you know, the Series X and the PS5 versions are absolutely completely different builds. It's not just a compatibility issue; it is simply they are completely different builds and take full advantage of the architecture of the next generation consoles. But the PS4 and the Xbox One release dates, we will know them any day now. Literally, you know, they're in final cert now, and we're quietly confident that come next week we'll be able to announce the date.
Oh wow! I'm really excited for that. When you guys do publish something like Dark, do you ever get feedback from the Bloober team? Do they ever get to play it too, and they're like, "Oh, we love this game," or do they ever throw ideas at you guys?
Oh yeah, they I mean, one of the easy things with Darq was the easiest deal we ever did internally because everyone knew the game. So you know, it was like, you know, I spoke to the CEO of Bloober Team and said, hey, you know, can we should do this? This is really great. It's like, absolutely, no argument for me. Let's do it. In fact, in Vlad's book, which is a book of his experience developing the game and you know, marketing the game, uh, um, Darq. There's several quotes from people from, you know, Bloober Team, the guys, the game designers, the level designers, also Peter Babiano, the CEO, in that book. So yeah, I mean, there was there is absolutely a level of knowledge of Darq. I mean, you know, again, it's a really widely known game in the indie scene now. So, and it's a fantastic game. Check it out. I'll
Absolutely.
send you a code.
Oh, awesome! Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, I know that there's going to be a lot of people watching this afterwards, so it's really good for them to get to hear about Dark. It's good for them to hear about the medium and the Bluebird team and, you know, Feardemic, because I think that a lot of times people don't realize that there's, you know, there might be one major studio, but there's branches to a studio or subsidies to a studio, and it's like a, I wouldn't say like a machine, but it's like a group, like a really nice group of people that work together to get things out there, to publish things, to produce things. So it's something that I always like to point out because it's never just you snap your fingers and something's developed or something's published. And a lot of people, I think these days, think that it's just that easy, and it's not. It's time consuming, and it's teams. It's good teams of good people and positive people that get these things out there.
Yeah, well, thanks for your feedback, and we, you know, have a lot of experiences that we're more than happy to share. And you know, I try and keep a blog happening when I get time to write things about publishing, and I'm always happy to sort of, you know, talk to developers and you know, share my experiences. And you know, it's not again, I mean, I must stress that, you know, there's not one shoe fits all when it comes to games publishing or game development as well. Every game idea or every game developer's projects are unique and require a different approach. And that's what makes this business so exciting. I mean, there's no rules. Literally, you just never know. You know, I remember having a coffee with the community manager of Fortnite, you know, before just as they were releasing the multiplayer version, and really they had no idea. They had no idea it was going to be that big. They were kind of like, well, we're doing everything we can to sort of get it in front of as many people as we can, and get it in front of influencers and YouTubers and streamers. But they really had no idea that it was going to be that big. Certainly, I've never met a venture capitalist said, "Well, I was trying to invest in Fortnite, but they wouldn't let me." I mean, and this is the exciting thing about the games industry. You can go from zero to hero, or hero to zero in a pretty much a short period of time. But it's not just, I suppose, the games industry. The entertainment industry is kind of like that in general, whether it be movies, whether it be music, and games, and games are really the true multimedia project. They've got every aspect of, they've got the same aspects of film, aspects of music and sound design, as plus the game mechanic itself, all sort of pushed into one project. So look, it is really an exciting business, and it's an exciting time to be in the business, and it'd be really interesting to see how where it goes in the next 5 or so years. So hopefully Feardemic will flourish there, and we'll work out how to be able to exist in a world of subscriptions.
I think so because people need to see good creative horror games, and you're looking at all aspects of horror. You're looking at like the dark horror, you're looking at like the humorous horror, you're looking at horror that children might like, like the Goosebumps style or the Monster High. So I think that's fantastic. For example, my daughter, she is 18. She loves horror games, and her love for horror games started with Five Nights at Freddy's.
Mhm.
She played that, and after that, she got hooked on it, even though it was more like suspense and fear. After that, she started playing, like, Outlast, and she really loves Layers of Fear. That is one of her favorite horror games. I remember her screaming at one point. I think it was, like, she was in a kitchen somewhere, and she was getting chased by something, she was just screaming, and she had a good time with it. She had a lot of fun, so really excited to see what you guys put out there and what you guys publish and what you guys find, and, I wish Feardemic tons of success. I think that, you're the right guy for the job, and it's just a fantastic thing that you guys are doing.
Well, thank you very much for the time, and great to speak to you. And yeah, thank you very much. I really do appreciate the platform to tell people about Feardemic and a little bit about what we do, and hopefully they'll enjoy our games.
Absolutely. Do you want to tell people where they can find you or find Feardemic?
Find Feardemic at www.feardemicgames.com. It's feardemic-games.com. Or yeah, if you type it into Google, you will find us. I mean, it's been kind of a strange year for the word Feardemic. Last year it was just like kind of an interesting name. This year it's taken on a whole new meaning, and certainly, we've found ourselves, bombarded by various different things, thinking that it was something else. But no. But Feardemic's games, you will be able to find us, no problems at all.